What's up, and welcome back to Nowstalgia Pod, giving you your weekly look at what's going on in pop culture. My name is Patchy, joined by my co-host Dave Marston. Dave, end of the year, trying to fit in all these topics, trying to get to all these things going on. How are you feeling about this week?
Feeling good. Feeling good. Nostalgia wrapped. We're here, baby. December. Let's go.
Yeah, we're going to be talking Wrapped. We're going to be talking the Sights and Sounds poll that just came out, the updated after 10 years. Got some music. We got a TV show. We got a concert to talk about. But as Dave aforementioned, Spotify Wrapped hitting all of our Spotify's this past week, as well as all of our Instagram stories and our Twitter feeds. Dave, is Spotify Wrapped the best way to say we're tracking you that any company has thought of so far?
Oh, definitely. See, and that's the thing. Why I like it so much is they're tracking you either way. So at least make it fun. At least give me something more, you know? And I'll take it one step further. Because I'm so interested in this, I would pay more to have more data insights about myself. Now, I know that's not most people, but I do
Whew.
find it quite interesting.
Dave just succumbing to the data mining entities that rule our social media driven world.
I don't have an Alexa in my home, so there's no always on microphone listening to everything I literally ever say. So I'm doing better than most.
That's true. I have two Alexas in my home and a Google Nest. It's very confusing. Um, yeah, Dave. I mean, before we get into just like the general takeaways from Spotify Wrapped, how did you feel about your Wrapped this year?
Good, good. I always find it very interesting because in the lead up to it, as December turns, you're always wondering like, what is it? Sometimes you might have a decent idea. I think for us too, I've definitely noticed this in past years. If I did like a discography catch up or re-listen in full, that kind of by default brings an artist into the top 5 for me
Mm-hmm.
on the year. Didn't actually have that this year, but I remember in the past when we've done album rankings, it's just so obvious. But this year actually seemed quite genuine just on what I was listening to and what I was digging. So it's always cool to see exactly what that was. I do enjoy that top songs playlist where you really get the full rundown of your top 50 or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
That's always cool.
Yeah, this year, the two things you mentioned, like having an artist discography, totally ruin your top 5. That happened this year for me with The Weeknd. Go check out those rankings
Damn,
at
that was early in the year
youtube.com.
too. You couldn't fix it, huh?
You know what else I noticed though is I'm a big listen to podcasts to go to sleep to guy. So that means that a lot of times I fall asleep and the podcasts keep playing. And
Mm-hmm.
so my top podcast is not one of my favorite podcasts. It's just one that is fairly relaxing to listen to. So a little skewed in that sense. I think also getting married this year, we were doing a lot of listening to best wedding songs, which was great. Wedding songs are very enjoyable, but doesn't necessarily speak to my personal taste all the
Yeah.
time. So, not my favorite Spotify Wrapped this year. I'm kind of over Wrapped if I'm going to be completely honest, but
Interesting.
people love it.
What are your top genres this year?
Uh, it was pop, rock, rap. Then it was indie rock, and I forgot what the last one was. It was something
In-
very generic.
yeah, okay, that's funny. So for me, it was rap, pop, K-pop, debut in top 5 for me, UK
Ooh.
hip hop, and then number 5, Hollywood. What the fuck is Hollywood music, my guy? I have no idea.
Just listening to I don't know, it's a Hollywood band. I don't even know. Father John
But
Misty on repeat.
what
Like
does
what?
that mean?
I don't know. It's they have ridiculous stuff. I mean, this year they did the what was it? The your
Listening
listening mood,
personalities,
yeah,
new
listening
thing.
personality. And mine was relaxing, calming morning, and then it was chill, relaxing afternoon, and then guess what my evening was? Relaxing heartbreak evening. And I was like, what are we talking about here? First of all, I'm just listening to chill music all the time, just a chill
Hmm.
guy.
My listening personality was the early adopter, which I actually think is pretty fitting. In terms of I'm always listening to new stuff, and it's like a volume game for me, both in terms of covering stuff on the pod, but also just listening to a lot of stuff we don't cover. So I was like, actually, that kind of tracks with how I use Spotify. I think the other thing for me too is I I like 60,000 minutes for music, 40 something for pods. But like, I also have my own music library. So a lot of like my re listening of older songs is not tracked via rap. So it's not the full, dive on what I actually listen to, just of course in Spotify. What was your number one artist? What was your number one song?
Number one song was "Baby I'm Yours" by the Arctic Monkeys, which was my wedding song, my first dance. So unsurprising, we
Okay.
listened to it a lot in order to like practice the dance and whatnot.
Hmm.
But honestly, only listened to it according to Spotify like 30 times. So that's
Hmm.
my number one song 30 times. I guess I'm just not re-listening to a lot of stuff. Number one artist was The Weeknd,
Right.
which
Oh, right. You said that. Yeah.
yeah, not my number one artist for the year. But what about
Uh,
you?
my number one artist was Drake, which is not surprising. He did release two new albums this year. And my number one song was Ladbroke Grove, the grime song by AJ Tracy, which I was super hyped to see at number one. I love that song. Number two, though, was a song I thought would be number one, which is Shut Down by Blackpink, because I'm just obsessed with that song. And Blackpink was my number two artist.
The Blackpink love is real. Dave, outside of our own personal Spotify wraps, which if you want to know more about our musical taste, just listen to the podcast. But what do you take away from some of the global trends and data that was put out there? Bad Bunny, number
Yep.
one most streamed artist in the world, followed by T Swift, Drake, The Weeknd because of this guy and BTS.
Yep.
But the US very similar. Just throw Kanye in there instead of Taylor, or not instead of Taylor, instead of BTS. Sorry,
Hmm.
but what else did you take away from it?
Yeah, I think if you look at the global charts, you look at the US charts, you look at male, female, mixed, whatever it is, I think the big takeaway, which has been kind of talked about already a lot this year, is that there's not really any new stars. You're seeing lots of people in the top five that didn't release new music this year. Olivia Rodrigo, top 10 female artists in the US this year. Doja Cat, same thing. You know, those albums are old, but those songs stuck around. It's a big thing about how playlisting works, about I think just how hard it is for new artists to break through. You had Juice World, top five male artists in the United States. The posthumous album was last summer. You
Mhm.
know, um, Morgan Wallen, that album was quite old, but that guy's just never leaving the chart. Stuff like that. Um, if you look at the songs, number one as it was, I think that was pretty predictable. But number two was Heat Waves,
Yeah, what
Glass
the fuck?
Animals, which I feel like I thought that had peaked last year. I was obviously wrong. Number three, Kid Leroy and Bieber, Stay. Same thing. Never mind. Then you
Doesn't
had
make any sense.
you had some Bunny songs. You had Cold Heart by Duo and Elton, apparently sticking around in earnest this year. Number 10 was Kate Bush, Running Up the Hill. That's cool to see given the phenomenon that was, of course. Um, yeah, I think that's my big takeaway is that a ton of artists were able to dominate without new drops, especially on the female side. Doja, Billie, Ariana, Rihanna, Nicki, SZA, Olivia. Like, you know,
Mhm.
the people of yesterday are still here today, still killing it. New music be damned. So whether that's a good thing, whether that's a bad thing, I do think it is not the best that there was like no like true like top tier breakout. It just feels like there's not enough room for it right now with the way these trends are shaking out. So be interesting to see how that continues in the years to come.
Yeah, it's really perplexing in a sense because um while I think as you laid out, it makes sense that we would see this. And on the other hand, like you would think someone like Blackpink, who is just so big and on the rise, put out an album this year that you would see them like taking on some of these female artists like spaces. Now they're in the top five K-pop, obviously, but
Yeah.
I expected to see them a little bit higher on some of these things, right?
So I looked at the K-pop data too, and what was quite interesting to me, globally, number one BTS, number two Blackpink, no surprise there. However, in the United States, Twice was ahead of Blackpink. I would have never guessed that.
Wow, huh? That's fascinating. Uh, I guess I did anecdotally did hear that their tour at MSG was very rowdy.
Yeah,
So maybe that makes more sense than I give it credit for.
right.
Just like other like random stuff. So some of the things shared were like songs with the most shared lyrics globally. So people sending lyrics back and forth to each other. Like old songs. Heat Waves is number one. Then you have a song by Conan Gray called Heather, and then you had the rounding out the top five was "Summertime Sadness" by Lana Del Rey and "Somewhere Only We Know" by Keen. Like, what or why are people sharing these lyrics? Like, I need to know more about why this is
Huh.
happening.
I can't say I've ever shared lyrics with Spotify anyway. So
Me neither, but apparently people are doing it.
you
You
really,
know,
you really had to share Heat Waves lyrics. You couldn't just like type that one out.
heat waves keep freaking me out. I mean, you know, if you know, you know.
It was all the British people when they had the crazy heat in Europe. They were just like, "Fuck, I don't have air conditioning here. Let me send you this song."
Yeah, the Spotify streaming was actually what's causing the energy crisis over there. So little did
Oh
we know.
gosh.
Some of the most popular podcasts, Dave, Joe Rogan. Thoughts on that?
No surprise. He's
No.
at the top. Usually makes sense.
Call her daddy with their Gluck Gluck. Was it Gluck Gluck
9,000.
3000,
Yeah.
9,000? Coming in
Um,
at number two, both globally and domestic.
Now
And
that
then
is
Crime Junk.
impressive.
Yeah, Crime Junkie rounding out in the both top fives. And then in the US, The Daily and Armchair Expert with Dak Shepard. Dave, why aren't we in this top five?
The Dax Shepard one is perplexing to me.
Yeah, he gets huge guests. He just had uh Jordan Peele on like last week,
Sure.
and I think Spotify pushes it because I think he's technically part of
Right.
the
I think
company.
that's the takeaway with Call Her Daddy. Spotify
Yeah.
acquires that podcast
Hmm.
and serves it up.
Yep.
You know, and that's good because they spend a lot of money on it, so you might as well get your return. So I guess it does make sense.
Absolutely. Any other takeaways?
Um, I mean, there's tons of data to look at, but yeah, I think overall, just the lack of new stars is I think the most evident thing to me. But overall, I enjoy this kind of like data review. I find it enjoyable, both personally and this more macroly to analyze stuff. So I'm here for it.
Dave is a confirmed stats guy. So uh, you drop him all of your Spotify stats, tell him how many minutes you listened, what your mood and personalities are. But Dave, you talked about no new stars. What about Rina? Rina Sawayama. She a star to you?
That's a great question. Saw Rina Sawayama live, Hold the Girl tour, the last stop on the North American leg of that tour in Boston at Roadrunner. My first time at that venue. This was a rescheduled show, supposed to have happened early November, but Rina had to reschedule a number of shows last month because she lost her voice. So just had to put them off for a little bit. But I think that's a great question. Is Rina Sawayama a star? Because if you recall, the second album, Hold the Girl, did not have those album sales that we were hoping to see from someone's second album after a lot of critical acclaim and popularity online. Didn't seem to be bearing out in the mainstream. However, I think the fact that she can tour the United States and sell out 3,000 person rooms across the country is the most important thing when it comes to evaluating an artist's actual like degree of success, right? Um, she does have that fan base, and that's also the way that an artist actually makes money. So in the grand scheme, I think she's doing just fine. And I had wanted to see Rina last spring this year, which was a postponed COVID show. It was her first show in Boston. But that was like a club show that had been sold out like, before the pandemic happened and before she really like took off in the US. So this was, I think, her return to like the touring and like her current status as an artist. So happy to see it. And I thought she was really great. I think what stood out to me right away was her vocals were just really stable live. Like I thought she sang great and did a thing that we've talked about before. I think a lot of people experience in their lives where you see an artist in person and those songs that you know from the studio recordings are actually livened or better and more
Mm.
enjoyable in that live setting. People can check our review of Hold the Girl, the album, youtube.com/nostalgiapod. We had mixed feelings on it. I think partially because it wasn't quite as experimental and forward-looking as her debut album Sawayama was. Not necessarily that it was bad, but it just felt a bit safer, not as exciting, right? However, a lot of those songs that we weren't like super impressed with, I thought were awesome live. I was really digging it. Songs like
Hmm.
Catch Me in the Air, Hold the Girl title track, Hurricanes, like she was like ripping into it. I think the live drums and the live guitar like were such a huge help too. Like that was like my first takeaway was I thought she just really crushed it with songs that I wasn't a huge fan of. You know, even like the slower stuff too, like Bad Friend off the first album and like Send My Love to John, like the ballady stuff. It's like, you know, she's just like a really great singer. Like it just is like really happening. Um I think over
That's great to hear too, especially when she takes some time off for the vocal fry. You know.
yeah. No, totally. And I think what's a really cool touch too is like you wouldn't like consider Rina Sawayama like a huge like dancer. She's not. But like the dancing is like I think just like staged enough, just like theatrical enough with the two backup dancers with her. And along those lines, she did an outfit change in sync with every like genre switch she did with the set list. As we know from the two Rina albums, and I think a big reason why Rina got so popular and well liked critically was that range of music she has, right? So going from like that power rock stuff to the straight up new metal 2000s stuff to then the more like ballady vocal pop, and then of course ending with like This Hell, which is like throwback country pop. Like it was really cool to see her like switch her persona, switch her outfit across the performance and have that match the actual like level of music she was doing. Most artists can't do that, right? Because like they don't have that genre range. But that was like
Yeah.
really cool thing I noticed like in the moment.
Man, it sounds like she, for someone who is still on the rise, is pretty confident in terms of how she's like framing these live shows, how she's going about like executing it, and the fact that she like levels up the performance live is such a good, I think a good sign of her true artistry. I think when you go and you hear songs and they don't really pop as much live, you're kind of you should be a little suspicious about how good this artist actually is.
Totally, I totally agree. Um, yeah, and then I think like at the end of the day, like it was cool to just be in a big room of people that like really know Rena's music. You know, songs like "Como de Garçons" explode when you're in a room of
Yeah.
Rena fans. Excess as well. Um, comes back after the encore, does This Hell. A bunch of people were wearing cowboy hats to the show, you know, getting in the spirit. Uh, yeah, man, it was a great time. I thought she was really good. Definitely will see her again when that next album comes around. And yeah, like it honestly like made me like reconsider some of my thoughts about the album, which I never thought
Ah.
like I would think. But yeah, I thought she was really great. And overall, I've been a huge fan of hers, and she's gonna go tour this in Europe now into the new year. But you know, I'm curious to see like what's next, right? Because on this album or on this tour, she always did like a cover spot, and she for the last show in the U.S. she did what apparently her crew said was like the best cover she's been doing all year, which is Brandy Carlisle's "The Story," and she said
Ah.
she actually met Brandy Carlisle backstage at Elton John's show and like could barely speak because she was like, you know, like so starstruck and stuff. But you know, we've seen Rena like working with people like Charlie. I wonder like can she like really ascend to that next level of stardom? Because as this tour is established, like she has like real fans, she's a very successful artist. But like I wonder if like if she can like really push forward to like some like huge collaborations. I wonder if the next cycle we'll see something like that. Time will tell.
It'll be fascinating to see. She needs that mainstream album to kind of grab people. So hopefully the next one has a little bit more popular appeal. But we're gonna keep it rolling to an artist or a group that doesn't have a ton of mainstream popular appeal, but the real heads know that 100 Gecs is the future of music, and they're back with a short little EP, Snake Eyes. Just three songs. Dave, how do you feel having Gex back after a 2 year wait?
I feel good because alongside the release of the Snake Eyes EP, 100 Gecs confirmed that their or sophomore album, 10,000 Gecs, is coming out on March 17th next year. That
Hell
was an
yeah,
album they
St.
announced the
Patrick's Day.
title long ago, right? But it'd been some time. And now that we know that that's coming, and they still gave us a little taster in the meantime, how exciting! Because 100 Gecs, as I think as people know, Dylan Brady, Laura Les, just hyper pop, the picture in the dictionary. It's them, right? Like that. This is what they do. This is what they're famous for. They're the face of this genre. And I think this brief EP, 6 minutes long, reminds you exactly what the Gecs experience is all about. And I am very excited for 10,000 Gecs because I thought there were a few moments on the short but sweet Snake Eyes that I liked quite a bit.
Yeah, like you said, only 6 minutes, but I think there's a lot here to acknowledge and to talk about. And I think right from the first song, "Hey Big Man," uh, kind of hard to listen to that opening and not get Beastie Boys
Oh
flashbacks.
yeah,
And
facts.
then like the rest of the song just feels like a Steve Aoki like Beastie Boys remix, and it's fucking electric and so much energy, and you're just like, oh yeah, Dylan Brady can just fucking pump these out, no problem. Like he's all over this genre right now. He's doing a lot of producing and collaborating, and just it immediately puts you right back into Gex's like wheelhouse with that
hmm
first track.
Totally. And I think track 2, "Torture Me," featuring Skrillex, I was like, Jesus Christ. This is Gecs doing their melody shit like they did on Money Machine, their biggest song. Let's fucking go. I think that one goes so fucking hard. The Laura vocals are just so catchy.
Yeah, I agree. Laura sounds great in that. For me, it wasn't one of my favorite tracks from this one, but I definitely appreciated it, and it was kind of interesting to hear Skrillex collaborating with them. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I just wouldn't have really put them together for some reason in my head.
Yeah, no, I agree about that. I think in general, I'm always just so perplexed when I see Skrillex pop up because he hasn't released a solo album since 2014.
That's all right.
And his
I'm not
his
missing them.
his last collab album, Jack U at Diplo, that was 2015. So it's like been a
Hmm.
minute, right? But you look and like his songs and his collabs and his features still do numbers. I'm always wondering like, what's that guy up to? But him linking up with Gex, not a bad thought, honestly. Um,
That makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
What
And
did you
then
think about the last one, Runaway?
Run, yeah. I guess that's like the closest they get to like a slower song, right? Like
Hmm.
a Gex ballad, quote unquote. So not what I would gravitate towards from them, but I still think it's pretty cool. Um,
It felt a little bit like a Porter Robinson like take.
yeah, New
It's so
Porter,
soft
yeah,
in the beginning, and then they kind of bring in a little bit more of the Gex production by the end with the heavy distorted bass. But
right,
yeah, I don't know. I thought that one was kind of forgettable.
right. And I think well, just in general, like we have these 3 songs on Snake Eyes, and we have like some of the singles that have come out since the remix album, the 1,000 Gex and the Tree of Clues came out in 2020. We've had what Doritos and Fritos, Me Me Me, Sympathy for the Grinch, but I think most notably would be the Laura solo track, Haunted, which became a hit, was featured in Euphoria Season 2. Speaking of catchy Laura melodies, that's another great example. So I think just like taking all of the last like year and a half, 2 years of Gex music, whenever form we've got it, putting that all together, like I'm just very excited for that second album, you know?
Hmm.
Like you mentioned, Dylan's been working with Charlie, he's been working with Rico Nasty, hasn't been quite as busy lately, which I think is a good sign. They're probably focusing on themselves right now. But yeah, just because it's so unpredictable and so extreme, obviously we know it's grating to many. It's not for everyone, but it's just unique to me. And not that I love every song they make. I don't know how you could when it's this kind of music, but I always have fun being surprised by what they do. And that's why I'm really looking forward to the next record.
Always looking forward to the next Gex project. We'll be tuned in when they drop that. Hit that subscribe and that follow on Spotify. Go check out your Wrapped, and then follow our Nostalgia Best of 2022 playlist, where we'll be adding a song from ITZY for the second time this year. They're back with a short little EP, Cheshire, after their last. They dropped Checkmate back in July, and we
Yep.
did review that. So check that out, youtube.com/nostalgia pod. But Dave, this 4 song, 12-minute EP. Are you right back into the ITZY uh, web, so to speak? Are you down for the ITZY again?
Honestly, I am. Since we listened to Checkmate, I've become more of an ITZY fan. Going back like a few years to their big single Wannabe, which is rising up my K-pop song rankings all time. I really dig that one. And I think this is just like why I like K-pop is like they just love to just drop some songs on us like this.
Hmm.
The second EP in 5 months, fuck it, let's go. You know, I think it's a lot of fun. And Cheshire, like you said, 4 tracks. It's quite brief, but the title track, the music video song, the banger that we know every K-pop release has, Cheshire, the that I think I actually like more than the previous EP's banger Sneakers. I think Cheshire is
Hmm.
really strong, and
Yeah.
in general, I just like this group for I think just like the melodies they often bring in. Like I think often the vocal performances on those verses are good, but like the hook melodies often are just like really catchy to me, and
Yeah.
I have a lot of time for this group.
Yeah, I agree. Cheshire is really strong, really catchy. And I think just the playfulness of them comes across in all these songs. They just feel very like lighthearted and fun and exactly what you want pop music to be. I think the first two, Cheshire and then Snowy, which they interpolate for release, like the classical song, when they do the da 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 da, like around the chorus, just like very funny to me that they did that, but it works so well. I think those two are by far my favorite songs off this. What about you? Outside of Cheshire, any other songs stand out?
Yeah. So I think Cheshire's, like you said, it just has so many moments, right? Like I think the bass line too, just like the production on this, I quite enjoy. Snowy, like you said, there's always moments, right? Like it's like the na 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 part. Like there's always like these like little vocal ticks that like the way they sing them, they're just like so catchy that it's like sticking in your brain. Um, on was it a freaky? The harmony on that
Mm,
from all of them, like I think that sounds great too. Really groovy song. And then Boys Like You, I think is like the most unusual of the bunch because that's an all English track. Definitely feels a bit from a different genre. Bit of like a kind of like a throwback pop track from them.
mhm.
But I think just overall, I like their presence on the mic. I think the two rappers, Yeji and Rujin, like really like how they sound, and yeah, I'm just looking forward to seeing what's next from them too. Like they were the eighth most streamed K-pop act this year on global Spotify. Pretty impressive for a group that's only been around a few years, and I think they're kind of quickly like taking up that space as like one of the top, if not the top, like fourth gen K-pop acts. Acts that debuted in around the 2020s. This new era we're entering in with K-pop. They seem to be towards the front of that, and definitely hope a full length album is on the horizon after a year of some EPs. But yeah, I think a lot of their tracks so far the past few years, I think just there's just a lot of like fun qualities to what they're doing. So hope they keep it up.
I think they're a K-pop group that will continue to rise. JYP Entertainment has a strong group here. We'll be talking about them as they hopefully just continue to drop these small little projects for us to enjoy. Dave, let's talk about another K-pop artist and really a king of K-pop, RM from BTS, getting that final album out before he goes on to do his military time over in
Hmm.
South Korea, and he's dropping Indigo this past Friday. Were you pleased with what you got?
Yes, I was digging RM's Indigo,
Yes.
man. I like this quite a bit. What about you?
Yeah, I think there's like a point in the album where there's a bit of a some some swings at some different genres that didn't totally work for me, but the first half of it is really really strong in my opinion, and then he kind of brings it back around with a couple of similar tracks at the end. So I think there's some songs in the middle that didn't really work for me so well, but the stuff we get at the top is just like, how could you not enjoy it?
Hmm. Yeah, no, I think well, I had a lot of anticipation for this. As we know, BTS on temporary hiatus. They've announced that they're all gonna make their plans to do their military service after they all do their solo drops, and then it sounds like the band's looking to reconvene together in 2025. The military service is like a year and a half commitment, so it's gonna be a while. But in the interim, we got the J Hope solo album, which we were quite surprised in a good way by earlier this
Hmm.
year. Jin released a solo single and is about to do the military service very soon. And now we have the RM album. And I think I always gravitated towards him early on. I think a big part of it, like, as a Westerner, like he was the most fluent English speaker. So like it was easy to like, I think, get attached to him as like an individual, as a personality. But I've always really enjoyed his rapping. Like I always thought he had really strong flow and presence on the mic as one of the main rappers of BTS. And I had heard his last mixtape Mono in 2018, which I thought was pretty good. But I was definitely curious, like, what would this RM solo be, post BTS break? And I think because it actually surprised me a bit with, like you said, like he's trying a few different things on this record, which I was surprised to see in a good way, you know. And man, I think he kind of earns like the reputation he's had as, he's one of the chief writers of BTS. He's a co-writer on damn near every song they've ever made. He produces as well. He's like that whole package when it comes to like a K-pop idol. So him finally getting to make something he really wants to make, which is what he's talked about a ton in the press leading up to this, needing that creative reset after 9 years of BTS and being so famous. And I think RM specifically also having to be a spokesman for the whole band and become a spokesman for Korean culture in the West. And he's spoken about the challenges they've all faced. They've been put in front of the United Nations and the White House. And it's like, I don't know if this is all for us or we're the most qualified to do this, but it's always been RM who I think has had to bear the brunt of that responsibility as the one who was most fluent as an English speaker. So I was just curious to see, like, what would you bring into your music that you really wanted to make before you have to, of course, go off to the army for a bit. So I think meta-wise, there was just a lot of interest on my part going into this, which I don't necessarily have for all the other guys in BTS.
I think that he completely delivers on this, and right from the get go, you get Erica Badu, then you get Anderson Paak back to back. Just a hell of a way to fucking introduce yourself
Flex.
in your solo career. But those first three, Yun, Still Life, and All Day, are just impeccable in my opinion. Just really, really strong songs. Erica Badu singing the hook on Yun is just fantastic. Still Life sounds so like Anderson Pocky in the best way possible,
Yeah,
and RM fits
lively.
into it so well. And then All Day is so smooth and energetic. It's like, how can you really not love those first three? I don't know.
Totally. And I think what's cool about this record, too, you mentioned All Day featuring Tableau, and you have other people on this record, like Eugene later on Wildflower, which seems to be the big hit here. These are Korean artists that are not on HYBE Big Hit. These are not like BTS label mates.
Hmm.
RM is actually making music with non label mate Koreans. And like you don't see that all the time in K pop music where the label has a lot of control over that. And I think that was just like really exciting to me where it's like you have a song like All Day. Tableau is like RM's like Korean hip hop OG in a sense, someone he's a big fan of who is like kind of a forefather of his. And I mean, I think the flow on that track is so damn good from both of
Yeah.
them, And that's just really cool to see. A song like Wildflower, Eugene is a Korean rock star, a Korean rock band. Bringing someone like that in, and I was like, man, these vocals on the feature, some 2000s emo vibes to me.
Hmm.
Pretty passionate, you have to think. Um, so yeah, I was quite pleased with the guests. Obviously, I'm not being very familiar with most of them, but I was like, wow, this is. I think it came across as quite inspired to me.
Yeah, I agree with you on Wildflower. That and even the last song, number two, with Park Ji Yoon, I thought were really strong ways to end it. Number two is just so like catchy in terms of its like melody, the da 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 da. Like you're just like, it's like a elevator music, but in like the most catchy, wonderful way possible. I think the times when things didn't really work so well for me is when he tries to turn it down. And, potentially if I knew what he was singing about and I understood the language, I'd have a different take on it. But
Mhm.
for me, if you're not really bringing the energy and you're slowing it down, it's a pretty quick skip for me a lot of the time. So right after All Day, you get Forgetful with Kim Sawal, and then Closer with Paul Blanco and Mahalia. And both
Yeah.
of those were tracks that I was like just not feeling as much.
Yeah, I didn't feel those as much either. Although I do think on Closer, the Paul Blanco singing, like I thought the vocals were quite strong. Kind of reminded me of like a Rod Wave type in terms
Mm.
of like an
Yeah, he's got that
emotional,
like
like
wobble in his
yeah, like
voice.
sad singing, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think then after that you have Change Part Two, which is like a brief song, but it's also a sequel track to a random RM song from 2017 that he made with Wale of all people. Um, things change, people change, everything change. It's like, okay, I get what you're going to. It's a nice lead up into Lonely, which I think Lonely to me is my favorite track on Indigo
Ah.
because it's very lively production, right? More electronic, but you have like this acoustic strumming. But then you get into the chorus, and you have RM saying, "I'm fucking lonely," but it's like this upbeat production. And I actually really love that juxtaposition of these moody lyrics with this like lively production. And RM spoke to Variety about this song and saying that he wrote this song earlier this year in April when he was stuck in a hotel in Las Vegas. If we remember, the Permission to Dance on Stage tour happened. BTS performs for a week at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas and makes like $35 million. Meanwhile, RM can't leave the hotel and he writes this song about how he was actually feeling while that was all going down. I was like, shit, dang. I understand why he wanted to make something for him in the
Mhm.
form of this solo record, you know? It makes some sense. He's had a busy 9 years.
Yeah, definitely. Um, Again, I really think for a solo album, I was just impressed with this. You know, I think like you laid out really well in the preamble to this review. He just is a really talented member of BTS and just K-pop and musician in general. And I think you really see his talents come across on this. And even if it didn't hit fully for us, I'd like to hear people that actually do know the languages take on some of the slower songs, and if maybe
Yeah.
some of those lyrics are really meaningful or how they came across. It's hard to judge the songwriting for us.
No, totally. And I think of like some of the most popular BTS songs are songs that I don't really connect with because they're slower. But like BTS Army like rides for songs like Spring Day, which are super slow and emotional,
Hmm.
right? So I would not be shocked to hear that BTS fans do dig these slower songs, in fact, because as we said, like RM knows his way around making a song that's quite well established. So yeah, I'd imagine he's gonna get into the military service and get it out of the way pretty soon. Um, just get it done, you know. And I think he's established enough as a soloist that when he comes back, while the rest of the guys are still in the throes of the military stuff, I would not be shocked to see RM start doing guest spots, right? Mainstream stuff, right? Like he was
Totally.
doing press like a month ago with Pharrell for Rolling Stone, right? Like I think like they're in the music biz at this point,
Hmm.
so I'm sure we'll see RM do more solo work when he comes back before BTS returns. But I'm also wondering what's next for the BTS solo projects, right? We've gotten three so far, if you, counting the Jin single. I think Suga's the most established soloist in terms of previous solo work, but I can't help but be pretty interested in what the Jungkook solo album's going to be because he was the number one K-pop soloist this year in 2022, just based off a few singles and like the Charlie Puth feature and stuff like that. And he just seems to be so famous as a soloist. I'm curious what that one will be like. Um, but I'm sure we'll find out about it soon. It sounds like there's a plan for all these guys to stagger their releases and then go off to train. So we'll be hearing from somebody soon, I imagine.
So be following us so you can catch that review for Jungkook when it hits the streets. Also follow our Nostalgia Best of 2022 playlist on Spotify. Metro Boomin though, it's closing us out today. Uh, Back after Savage Mode 2 with Heroes and Villains. Dave, he's not Mr. Right, but he's Mr. Right now. And Metro just always seems to fucking get the most out of these people that he's working with, and I think that just continues on Heroes and Villains. I don't think that this is I don't think there's any of the bangers similar to Mr. Right Now. Like I don't know if there's any tracks of this I'm gonna be like, ah, that's like top 10 of the year for me. Maybe
Mm.
you'll have a different opinion, but just a really pleasurable listen throughout. And 21 Savage, everything he's on, I just really enjoy. He might be my favorite like rapper at the moment.
I think that's right. Metro Boomin, of course, coming up right alongside 21 Savage with the first Savage mode back in 2016. And since then, is he not like the preeminent rap producer in the last 5 years? I was thinking about
I
this,
think
and
so.
I think he is. And a big part of that has been his association with 21. We loved Savage Mode 2 at the end of 2020. But even before that, of course, he did Without Warning with 21 and Offset, and he had his other solo record, Only Heroes Wear Capes, and it's like he just like I think you said it right. Like he brings out the best out of his guests in the way like a DJ Khaled does not, obviously, and Metro Boomin production, whether 21's featured on it or not, the Metro production in general, like I've always just admired, like it has like a cinematic, like glossy sheen to it.
Totally.
And he really knows how to go into the darkness, especially when you have someone like 21 rapping over it. And like, man, like he can make those beats that'll haunt your dreams. Like he can like, get really dark, and it's just so fun. But like the way he sprinkles in like piano keys and stuff, like it's funny, I think, to hear like this kind of darkness in trap production. Of course, we associate that with drill production all the time, but to get it, I think, on the trap side of things, I think speaks to like the Metro personality in his music. And yeah, like I think there's just a bunch of fun bangers on this one. Shocker, right?
Yeah, I know. It's like you go track to track and you just find yourself like bopping along and just totally into it by like the 20-second mark of every single one. Also, he just has a great like call tag, the Metro, just like a
Yeah.
great
Metro
call
don't
tag.
trust you, he's gonna shoot you.
Yep.
Still true.
I mean, maybe one of the greatest drops ever, and we
Yep.
can't listen to it anymore. It's too bad. Anyways, Dave, tell me what was like the first track on this album that really just grabbed you?
Honestly, Superhero track 2 with Future. I thought Future sounded great, and the horns for Metro on Superhero sounds
Those horns,
awesome.
so good. And I couldn't believe how much I was enjoying Future on this track. It's been a long time since I think I said that.
Yeah, no, I think that one's great. That one's currently number 3 on US Spotify right now. Not surprised. I think that was awesome. And then yeah, like I think you just kind of like rip through it, right? You have a lot of 21 on this. You have a lot of Travis Scott on this. I think Travis sounds pretty good overall, but I think obviously we're going to gravitate towards 21 right now. And once we get to Umbrella with 21 and his cousin Young Nudie, like as soon as like the beat drops in, you have 21 just going, okay. So I'm like, let's fucking go. And is it the best 21 feature of the year? No, it's not. We had a lot of good ones with On Her Loss, of course, but I love them, and I think Nudie sounded great too. And I just have so much time for like 21 on Metro beats at this point. Still,
Umbrella is so great because you have the like chorus like tuned up and just like totally driving it home the first like 25 seconds, and then it all just fucking gets ripped away, and it's just like one piano key and just 21 like okay, and you're just like, oh
so
fuck,
good.
we're fucking doing it. It's just it's so good. Yeah, I thought that one was really great. I actually really liked a lot of what we got out of Don Toliver on this. I feel like he shows up on a couple of songs and I don't typically, I think, move towards him as an artist, but like I liked Around Me quite a bit. I thought that one was pretty good. I like the beat on that a lot, obviously, but that like quick percussion with then the slower one on top of it, I thought was great. And then the interlude, what's it called there? I lost it here. Just a few songs later, I Can't Save You interlude with Future and him.
Right.
Is like maybe my favorite beat on the whole thing, and I think he sounds really great on it. So I think those two Don Toliver songs really surprised me in terms of how much I liked them. What else stood out to you?
I quite enjoyed Creepin' with The Weeknd at 21, which is currently number 1 on US Spotify. And that I didn't realize this until I looked it up, but that is a remake of a 2000s R&B song by Mario Winans. I Don't Want to Know.
Oh, you don't know that song?
No, I don't really know that song.
Oh,
21
dude,
replacing
so
the Diddy feature, of course.
The Diddy feature is so good. That's one of my favorite. Like, I could probably rap that whole verse for you right now if you wanted me to. I won't.
Yeah,
but I could.
2000s R&B is a bit of a a hole for me, admittedly. But that's cool. That's inspired for sure, right?
Definitely.
I think Metro said his manager actually suggested he like flip or remake that song, and that's where it started. Pretty cool. Um, I think the weekend sounds great on that, and then you have
Mhm.
21 dropping in, still finding a way to fit on a song with the weekend. Sounds awesome. Right after that, Niagara Falls, Travis and 21. That one's pretty good. Um, at the end, I really enjoyed. Um, Walk 'Em Down with the piano for Metro on
Yeah.
that. Just
I was
really
about to
great.
say you can't jump over that one. Also, the
Yeah.
fact it's called "Walk 'Em Down, Don't Kill Civilians" is fucking hilarious.
Right. And then Feel the Fire, posthumous takeoff first. I think the first one we've heard. Still so fucking sad about that. And
Mhm.
then Rocky, I thought Rocky, ASAP Rocky sounded great.
Yeah, I really love the way they work in he did this a lot on this, but having the like kind of sped up beat underneath and then bringing in some like slower beats on top of it is just really worked for me on this. And yeah, on Feel the Fire, I feel like he does that really well. Um, overall, just from start to finish, a lot of bangers, really enjoyable album. Um, I was trying to think like when was the like is there any other like producer like albums like this that are at this level?
That's
I
a
mean
great
like
question, right? If you think of like recent producers, like no one's like on the Metro level, right? I think of like a Take Keith or a Jetson Maid or a Take a Day Trip. None of those guys are like right here. You'd have to like go back to people that are like predate Metro a little bit, like Mustard or
mhm.
even further back, like Hit Boy, Alchemist. I think those are the guys that like in terms of
Yeah,
like
Alchemist,
album
good
making
call.
are like on this level. They're probably above Metro's level, in terms of making stuff with like Freddie Gibbs or um, Black Thought or whoever it might be. But
I guess
I think
because
the
you
fact that
wouldn't.
he's in company with producers like that who have had a career twice as long as him is says a lot. So yeah, I think he's. I mean, obviously, he's like the face of Atlanta producing right now.
Absolutely, you wouldn't put Kate Trinata as a producer, more of a.
I mean, I wouldn't put him as a rap producer. No,
Yeah,
he's a
no.
producer. Yeah, for sure. We love him, but no, I mean, he doesn't really make hip hop.
True. Alrighty, well, we're gonna wrap up there with the music for this week. So again, Nostalgia Best of 2022 on Spotify. Dave, it's been 10 years though since the last Sight and Sound greatest films of all time poll, and not only have they given us a new list, but they've given us I think some interesting changes in the list, as well as, and I think that's really buoyed by the fact that the number of participants in the poll doubled since the last time they did this. So a lot more voices, a lot more opinions on
Yep,
here.
more
They
women, more people of color. Thankfully.
absolutely, and I think you definitely see that in a lot of the movies on here. But Dave, number one, if I were to tell you that the number one film of all time is Gene Dealman, a,
Yep,
uh, a
Belgian
French
film.
film, a Belgian film from 1975, would you call me crazy?
I mean, I definitely wouldn't have expected it. Uh, that's for sure. I think I did know a bit about the history of this list too. Vertigo, of course, hitting number one last time around in 2012, ending a 5-year run of Citizen Kane at number one, which of course would date back to 1962 because they do this every 10 years. So yeah, I definitely wasn't seeing that coming. But in listening to people talk about it, people that have seen the movie, I have not seen it. Uh, it is cool, I think, to see like a more like newer, recent admiration for a classic of the past get manifested on a list in this way. I think, like you said, speaks to the greater voting body on this. But yeah, talk about inspired. I think overall though, like if you look at the top 10, you look at the top 100, looks pretty good. I mean, I think they're really think picky with who they invite in, but it's a lot of critics and it's a lot of directors. And I think the BFI, British Film Institute, which runs this, runs the magazine, like I think they did a pretty good job. And to me, like it's just kind of like a cool document, like to look at. So I've looked at the 2012 list many times before, and for me, really, it's like as a film fan who's watched a lot of movies, I think it also makes me aware of all the movies I still haven't seen. And a list like this definitely like reiterates that, right? It's like, oh, I know that's great. I just haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just going through, I was like, oh yeah, I've seen maybe like 20 to 30 of these.
Yeah, it's
There's
about
just
30.
so much, so much on there that you really have to be like a deep film head to have gotten to all of it. Um, yeah, I think it's interesting to see the critics poll and then see the results of the directors poll, right?
Right, they are separate.
Um, so the directors poll, the number one spot is 2001: A Space Odyssey, which if you're a betting person, you probably have that as like a top five, no
Right.
doubter.
Yeah.
Um,
It's only number 6 on the critics poll.
only number six, not even top five, which is crazy. In the Mood for Love,
Yep.
2000 movie that I'd never heard of.
Wong Kar Wai, man. Yeah, that's his
Yeah.
most popular movie for sure.
But yeah, I'll admit Wong Kar Wai definitely a blind spot in my movie watching experience. But yeah, the director's poll I think is a lot more in line with what I expected. 2001, Citizen Kane, The Godfather, top three. I mean that just makes sense to me. Um, Gene Dealman is number five on that. With
Right?
Vertigo number six. So a lot of overlap, but um, yeah. I mean, talk to me about the new movies that made it on though, because it's
Right.
not maybe the movies you'd expect.
Yeah, and I think 2012 I think only had like I want to say like 2 movies get in from the
Hmm.
2000s in like the previous decade. And that was an open question going into this, something I definitely was thinking about myself. It's like what movies of the 2010s will crack in there, right? We did a best movies of the 2010s podcast at the end of 2019. Check that out. Great year for movies. But like what can like crack in the top 100 films of all time? It's such a you're competing against the rest of the history of movies. It's a tall task. It's nothing against the 2010s, and I think in general having more time away from that decade and the movies that came out in that will probably buoy further movies' chances of eventually cracking in, right? So in the meantime, we only got 4. I think that's actually quite strong, quite
Oh
inspired
yeah,
to get 4 2010s movies on the list this year. And those 4 would be Get Out, Moonlight, Parasite, and all the way at number 30, Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
insane. What? Portrait of a Lady on Fire? First of all, above those three, I would never put it above those three. And then at number 30 all time, what was your take on that?
So I think I had to take that. I think as a lot of people had to. It's like, oh man, that's tough for Portrait because it's like Portrait of a Lady on Fire does not deserve like hate like this,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
Um, I do think it's an inspired pick to put in there, though. Are those my top 4 movies of 2010s? They're not, but like in terms of like making this list, like I was like, yeah, Parasite was the one I was like really hoping would get in. And I
Mhm.
was thinking about that and like the follow up the week leading up to this, and I'm really happy to see that in there. That only came out
Yeah.
in 2019. It's so new. To also get Portrait though, which also came out in 2019. It's pretty cool, pretty crazy though.
It's funny when you talked about this list coming out. The first one that came to mind for me was Get Out. I figured Jordan Peele would probably get on there in some way, and Get
Uh,
Out makes the most sense. But it only came in at number 100, so barely cracked the list. But I was definitely glad to see that. Parasite makes so much sense, and probably is the one that should have came to mind for me.
right,
And Moonlight, I feel like is fairly inspired too. I mean, obviously, it had the very dramatic um, Oscar win and had a lot of love. Beautiful movie. I guess I just didn't think it was going to be worthy of a list like this, but really glad to see it on there, and great look for Barry Jenkins, just kind of continuing to anoint him as a filmmaker. And I think that's the thing is like out of the four filmmakers represented by the new movies, at least three of those I think we would say are probably like three of the best people making movies right now. So it makes
right.
sense.
Again, apologies to Celine Sciamma, but
Yeah.
yes, I agree. I think like, what do you think is like a really like credible case to crack this list, right? Because like my number one movie of the 2010s is The Social Network, Fincher, but like I understand why that maybe doesn't get on there, you know. Um,
Mhm.
I think something like Mad Max Fury Road though perhaps has more of like a posterity case for
Yeah.
something like this. It's an interesting question. You
Action,
have to
action in
also think of
general.
international film as well,
Yeah.
which is I think a big part of how Portrait and Parasite cracked through here. Of course, neither one is an English movie, but yeah, I mean it's quite challenging, right? Um, like Tree of Life, is that on there because that came out in 2011, right before 2012. I don't think so. Tree of Life isn't on there, right? From Malik.
No, Tree of Life didn't make it.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of genres are not as represented on this as you might expect. I think there's only like one or two westerns. I don't think there's
Yeah.
many.
Searchers is right there towards the top.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of like action films
No.
on here, and so I think I guess like Blade Runner might be like one of the only like sci-fi ones, that and Space Odyssey. But I wonder if Blade Runner 2049 eventually could make it on there.
I
I
don't know
don't
about
know.
that. I feel like there's other sci-fi classics you could go to first. Hmm.
Yeah, it's hard to think about like now, like, and you're talking about in the last decade, what other movies
Yeah.
could make it on?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really tough. I mean, Social Network, I think, could make sense. I think it's actually I think it's a movie that's aged well in a lot of ways, but also with how much things with Facebook and now Meta have like shifted, it's like
Yeah.
almost kind of like aged poorly in a way because it's so old, and
Right.
with how fast it all moved.
Maybe something like Lady Bird, Greta Gerwig.
That's a good call. I
That's
can
more.
see that.
I think that's something that kind of has more timeless feel to it
Yeah.
because it's already set in the past. Um. Yeah. No. It's obviously it's impossible to make a top 100 that would please everyone. We know that, but
Yeah.
definitely. I think BFI and Sight and Sound, they really take it very seriously, and you could tell like the critics that I follow that like did happen to have a vote, like they were sharing their list, and it was just really cool to see individual ballots and stuff. And I think it's just a really cool effort that happens, and the fact that it's once every 10 years too makes it like a really big thing.
hmm Yeah, definitely cool to talk about and a cool way to think about movies. But Dave, why don't we talk about a movie that I don't think will ever be cracking this list for many reasons, genre being one of them, but also just because I think the documentary version of Meet Me in the Bathroom, acclaimed biography, or not biography,
Oral
just
history.
oral history, thank
Yeah,
you,
from
of
2017.
yeah, of the 2010s, 2000s and into the 2010s rock scene in New York City, by Lizzie Goodman, just fell completely flat. And it something that's co-directed by Will Lovelace and Dylan Southern. I think as a Showtime product, this it has to be one of their like biggest disappointments, because this is so ripe for like a documentary series. You could have even followed like every band that's listed in this book and done like an episode on them, something similar
Mm-hmm.
to like things HBO's done with their music documentaries. Like you think
Yep.
about Sonic Highways with the Foo Fighters and whatnot. And there's so much potential here, and just I think they really misfired in the telling of this and the framing of it, and just in general, like how many voices they had. Like it felt very like sparse in terms of the different people who were kind of commenting on it. Just overall, I didn't find this to be compelling at all. What about you?
Yeah, I think it's important to like restate the Meet Me in the Bathroom oral history book by Lizzie Goldman is a critically acclaimed like music book
Yes.
from 5 years ago. There's a ton of attention when that came out, and a ton of headlines that came out of the book itself, right? Which is briefly mentioned, I guess, in this doc, which of course would be Ryan Adams being at fault for getting Albert Hammond struck out on heroin, basically, and the rest of the Strokes being fucking pissed about it.
Mhm.
That was like a big headline, big I guess controversy, because Adams denied it when the book came out. But
Ryan Adams, pretty much a confirmed piece of shit, by the way.
right,
So
and I was actually curious how much Ryan Adams we would get in this doc, because since the book has been written, the myriad misconduct allegations have come to light
mhm.
against Ryan Adams. But yeah, I think the issue with this doc I think a key fault in like the form of documentary filmmaking, which is like if you don't have any access, then there's no point. Like this is so much more surface level than the book. And
Mhm.
if the Strokes aren't going to participate in your documentary when they are the key figure of the whole doc, what are you giving us? Because all the footage we do see, all that archival footage, none of that's new. Strokes
Mhm.
fans have seen that shit before. So like nothing's being illuminated on, nor is it, I think, going far enough to visually represent how far the book did go and was so beloved for going. So it's just kind of like a nothing burger to me. And man, it is just disappointing because like the book reception went, like it is a really potent topic to explore, the 2000s rock scene in New York and what that represented. I think of like writers and podcasters that we both listen to, like people like Chris Ryan at The Ringer, like were there at the time and have spoken about experiencing that in the moment. You know, it's like it is, I think, a really like iconic like time in like modern music history,
Mhm.
and centered around the Strokes and the Yeah Yeahs and LCD Sound System and Interpol primarily, and yet this doc just feels kind of aimless in how it goes through things, and we quickly brush past how 9/11 affected things. We quickly brush past all these bands rising to fame. We quickly brush past Karen O perhaps giving us the most interesting thing in the doc, which would be how she felt different and perhaps ostracized for being a woman in the
Mhm.
scene at the time. She's not giving any time to that, but that was actually, I think, one of the most compelling aspects that they could have went into further. We
Completely.
also quickly brushed past the fact that this scene, perhaps in some way, may have contributed to the gentrification of Brooklyn in New York City. Like they don't commit to anything, unfortunately, with this documentary.
I might have missed it. Did they explain why it's called "Meet Me in the Bathroom"?
I think that's just a reference. Oh, it's the name of a Stroke song, right? And
I'm not aware of that,
I
but
think it
maybe.
is. And I think in general, it's just a reference to like "Come Do Coke with Me."
Well, yeah, they actually have a story in the book about this like person in this scene who like was like kind of known for basically being like come to the bathroom and do this with me, and it's like it's actually like a really funny story at the beginning of the book that I feel like would set the scene so much more. And I haven't finished reading this. It's kind of a
Hmm.
pick up a few pages here and there when I get to it. I'm about 2/3 of the way done. But one of the things I really love about the Lizzie Goldman book is just how it really like puts you in a place and you feel like you're in these clubs, like experiencing what these like shows were like, what the
Right.
scene actually felt like to be a part of.
No
And
smartphones.
yeah, exactly. It's just like people like hanging out, writing music, people being inspired by each other, the competitiveness between them all, which I think was also like buoyed by this camaraderie between them. And you just don't get any of this feel
Right.
in this. And you mentioned how there's not a lot of new footage, and even the stuff like some of the interesting stuff we do get from James Murphy of LCD Sound System, which I was like, of course James wanted to fucking participate in this. Like he's pretty like self-centered, neurotic
Hmm.
type of guy. It's not really like all that well like constructed. Like all of a sudden
No.
he's like, yeah, I was producing DFA and then Rapture didn't really want to keep going. And so I was like, oh, my life's falling apart. I might as well put a song out. And then I'm in Europe touring on this song. I'm like, what?
Huh.
Like,
I had to get a band.
yeah, it's like what all of a sudden? I mean, like I as someone that just loves LCD, I ate a lot of that stuff up. But when like the movie ended, I was like, what the fuck was going on there? And for a lot of the book, they talk about the Strokes' first tour over in the UK, and they touch on this when Interpol goes and tours, right? How everybody's just like, "Do
Yeah.
you know the Strokes?" But like
Right.
the stories from the Strokes tour over there is like one of my favorite parts of the early book, like all of their like shenanigans, and you just like to not have that in there. It's like, what are
Yeah.
we fucking
Like
doing?
young Julian Casablancas is clearly like one of the most compelling figures from this
Yes.
whole period, right? And he's like, it's like, oh, he doesn't like being famous. It's like, okay, can you give us a little bit more than that? Like
Yeah,
Jesus
and
Christ. And to
it.
confirm it, it is a Stroke song on Room on Fire.
Okay,
Meet Me in the
gotcha.
Bathroom.
Um, but it's just a totally like for what this could have been, just a total disappointment. And it's the sort of thing where, like you said, if you can't get this access, this is the sort of thing you could come back to in 10 years when these people hopefully are more willing to talk about this and like
Right.
reminisce about this, and it would have hit just as much then. But
Right. And,
they
and and
rushed
that's
it.
the weird thing to me too. It's like another thing they rushed is like file sharing, Napster, LimeWire. I
Yeah.
would love to hear more about that. But like Julian Casablancas, to his credit, I guess, is like a true like rock star guy. He does not want to sell out. So it's not surprising that he doesn't want to participate in this doc. However, Lizzie Goldman was managed to write the book what if you just made like a super like down the middle doc with a bunch of talking heads? Because Lizzie Goldman talked to a bunch of people to write the book,
Hmm.
did she not? Maybe
A
you could
lot of
talk to them
people.
too for the documentary. I don't know, but like, there's just not enough of a point of view. Like,
Yeah.
and it just kind of rips through a bunch of stuff, but it just feels like cliff notes, you know. So quite
Yeah.
disappointing.
You mentioned the stuff with 9/11 and like talking about how the city became, cheaper because, people were moving out of it after the attack, and it just felt like kind of short-sighted to the time. I mean, like 9/11 completely changed, the city and the way people felt about New York, and I think that's what made this scene so special. Was it like made people feel like there was something exciting again about the city,
Yeah,
something
community.
like, yeah, something that only you could experience here. And they just don't even like capture that well. And it's like if you can't even like nail the 9/11 parts, like I really don't know like who greenlit lit this, but
Nope.
ah, disappointing. I think it's time to move on though, because I can't keep talking about how sad this made me feel. Um, let's wrap up with Willow, the Disney Plus version. I guess I'll say.
Fantasy series, sequel series.
Fantasy series, sequel series. Yes, thank you. Um, Lucasfilm, which I was like, huh, I don't know if I've ever like, I don't know if I can recall seeing Lucasfilm on a non-Star Wars product. So that
Story
was
by George
interesting.
Lucas, lest we
Um,
forget.
Dave, I mean, this Willow series, how are you feeling after these first two episodes?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know about you, but I'm not like the biggest Willow guy. I've seen Willow once, the film.
Mhm.
I saw it later in life though. I didn't see it as a kid. 1988. Um, of course, starring Warwick Davis, who I have a lot of time for as Wicket, the Ewok in Return of the Jedi. So, this is like something else that George Lucas got to do with Warwick, and directed by Ron Howard. But like, to get this, I wasn't like clamoring for like more Willow, right? But I guess in the age of IP, it does make sense that this came to be. It sounds like Jonathan Kasdan, the son of Lawrence Kasdan, really pushed this show across the finish line, getting it made and whatnot. Yeah, I definitely enjoyed the first episode quite a bit. I think Willow kind of like exceeded my expectations in terms of establishing this cast of new characters, all these young people from
Mhm.
from various walks of life, and how they're together on this quest. I actually liked how they kind of set all them up. Yeah, is it a fantasy story that will have a lot of familiar beats? Yeah, for sure. But like, I actually enjoyed them, and I think the part that maybe is a bit more wait and see with me is how does like Willow himself, Willow the character, our wily sorcerer from the first movie, the return of Warwick Davis, who doesn't act a ton, at least not like as like a leading type role. How will he fit in? Because I was actually really digging like the dynamics between all our young performers, right? You have some people you might recognize like Aaron Kellerman and Tony Rivolori, right? Um, but like, how will Willow himself fit in? I think that's still a bit more up and down, or wait and see anyway. Notably, Val Kilmer is not back as Mad Mardigan. Um, you know, unsurprisingly, of course, given all his health issues. But yeah, I thought it was pretty fun. As a fantasy show, I think Willow, like the film, the series seems to be establishing, it's a bit more of like a more whimsical take on fantasy storytelling. It's not quite as dark, self-serious as other fantasy stuff that we might see. And I think for some people that's positive, for some maybe not so much. But I think it's tonally so far. I was picking up what you're putting down, so I'm intrigued to see how it continues. What about you? All right, have you seen the Willow film?
No, I haven't. And so for me, it was just kind of like, oh, this is. I didn't think I was like missing too much. I definitely
They
thought
do
there
a
was
lot of
like
exposition early on, so
they
that you
do
don't need to have seen it. Yeah,
exactly. Um, I think actually my biggest critique was the tone for me because I wasn't really sure what they were going for. At times, it
yeah,
felt like too silly for me. Kind of like they were going for more of like a like teen adventure type of feel, and then there were other times when it felt like pretty dark and like actually like off-putting, like all of the bad guy characters. I forgot their names. But all the ones that can like shapeshift, like or in the second episode, the knight who's like also like kind of like a fast like zombie type guy. I thought that like that felt like more scary and like serious. Obviously you get flashbacks to some of the like some future battle scenes, or I guess they're flash forwards to battle scenes, and that looks
Hmm.
pretty like gory. So like, I was just having a hard time kind of figuring out like what they actually were going for in terms of this series. I still think there's enough here to like keep it interesting, and I'm looking forward to just kind of like how they kind of pull all these pieces together, especially because I did not expect Alora to be captured at the end of the second episode. Spoiler alerts.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
overall, I thought it was interesting enough. Mostly, I was taken out by the fact that the Spider-Man like bully kid is such a prominent character
Tony
in this.
Revolori. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's
I
like
was.
the bookish prince who is
Yeah,
betrothed to someone he doesn't want to marry.
I was like, okay, sure. It's nice to see you, but it's also a little off-putting because I just want you to be like the snarky Spider-Man kid.
No, that's exactly how I felt though. I don't want him in a reined-in performance
I
because he's
know.
he's he's charismatic enough that like you like him as Flash and Spider-Man, right?
Hmm.
And like you feel like he's trying to like rein in himself
Yeah,
as this guy
exactly.
on Willow.
I completely agree. Who I did really like though was Amar Chadha Patel. I thought he
Yes,
was really strong as
he's
Poor
like the Mad
Man,
Mardigan stand-in, basically.
and yeah, he gets all the cool lines. He looks awesome. Long flowy hair.
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah,
actually a stud for sure.
exactly.
Yep, I liked him a lot. And that's why I'm saying like that dynamic of like everyone on the quest out there in the world. Yeah, I feel like they all seem to mesh pretty well. Show looks pretty good too. Shot in Wales, like I just them being out and about once they're away from the castle looks pretty good. Um, yeah, but like I think like plot wise, I'm not like super invested in it all. I'm just kind of enjoying the ride. So I'm curious about like how the willow of it all goes. Like I said, TBD there. John Chu actually from Crazy Rich Asians was supposed to make this show, and he had to step away last year. Um, Wonder if his take would have been radically different.
Hmm.
But I think this is probably the first like big in quotes, but like big like Marvel Disney or sorry Disney Plus show that's not Marvel or Star Wars. It's still Lucasfilm, but like probably their most significant new series that isn't Marvel or Star Wars, right?
Yeah, I'd say so in terms of new property. I'm
Right.
trying to.
Obviously, there's like unscripted stuff that's watched, like they moved Dancing with the Stars to Disney Plus, but like in terms
Exactly.
of new scripted series, I feel like this is probably it. Um, Curious how well it does too, because like Willow was a modest success and then a big home video success, but more on the cultish side of fandom than Star Wars, for example.
Hmm.
So I wonder like how this will pierce through as the holidays come up, right?
Yeah, definitely. This is the prime time for a show to kind of capture something for the holidays, but I don't think this is gonna be it. I don't know why. Just I don't know if people are going to Disney Plus looking for something. If they don't know that it's coming, like a Marvel or a
Yeah.
Star Wars. I don't know. Maybe it will be. Maybe I'll be wrong. Been wrong plenty of times. Um, any other thoughts on this?
Nope.
All right, let's wrap it up there for this week. Then, Dave, what do you got for next week?
Yeah, we got some, I think, bigger ticket stuff next week. The end of the White Lotus season 2. Very excited to get into all of that. Uh, Sophomore
Hell
album
yeah.
from SZA. At last, 5.5 years later, it's finally coming out. Of course, she waited till the end of December. Nevertheless, we're ready for it. The Will Smith comeback, Apple TV Plus, Emancipation, Antoine Fuqua film. It's here. They're putting it out. We'll talk about it. Also, Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio is coming out on Netflix, and apparently it's a lot better than the abomination that Robert Zemeckis made for Disney Plus a few months ago.
Well, big Pinocchio stands over here. So hit that subscribe on youtube.com/nostalgiapod and go to our Twitter at nostalgiapod to find our link tree and follow the podcast any way you want to. We'll catch you next week.